One. Clunk. Okay, thank you. Welcome to this meeting of Babergh District Council Cabinet. I'm Councillor Deborah Saw, leader of Babergh District Council, and will be chairing this meeting. May I remind you of some domestic arrangements. Please ensure that microphones are turned off when not in use. Please do not interrupt other speakers or hold separate conversations whilst others are speaking. If you're attending the meeting to speak and persistently interrupt the meeting, you may be asked to leave. Please ensure your mobile phones are on silent or switched off. Finally, we will be using e-voting for this meeting on the modern.gov app, so please could members make sure they are logged in and ready to use the app. The council, members of the public and the press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and the press are not lawfully excluded. If you're intending to do so, please could you inform the committee clerk. Can I move to the agenda, please? Item 1, apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Alistair McCraw and Councillor Jessie Carter.
Thank you. Item 2, to receive declarations of pecuniary, other registrable or non-registrable interests by members. Are there any to declare? No. Thank you. Item 3, BCA/24/01, to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on 7th May 2024. Are there any points regarding the accuracy of the minutes? Could I have a proposer, please? Councillor Ward. Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Potter, thank you. Governance Officer will now conduct the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now in progress. Thank you, Chair. That is 6 votes for. That's carried.
Thank you. Moving on, item 4, to receive notification of petitions in accordance with the Council's petition scheme.
None received, Chair.
Thank you. Item 5, questions by councillors.
None received, Chair.
Okay. Item 6, matters referred by the Overview and Scrutiny or Joint Audit and Standards Committees.
There are no matters referred, Chair.
Item 7, forthcoming decisions list. Are there any comments? Councillors? No. Okay. I will now move item 12, BCA/24/05, Housing Assistance Policy under the Regulatory Reform Order, up the agenda to be considered first. Item 11, Part 2, exclusion of the public, which term includes the press. We'll be going into closed session to consider whether, pursuant to Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, the public should be excluded from the meeting for the business specified below on the grounds that if the public were present during this item, it is likely that there would be the disclosure to them of exempt information as indicated against the item. The author of the report proposed to be considered in Part 2 of the agenda is satisfied that the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. Can I have a proposer and seconder, please? Councillor Helen Davies, seconder Councillor Ward. We will now vote by a show of hands. All those in favour? Okay, so that's unanimous. The live stream will be stopped. BCA/24/02 Social Value Policy. We are joined now by Melissa Evans, the Director of Corporate Resources, Katrina Browning, Head of Commissioning and Procurement, Joe Hobbs, Head of Strategic Policy, and Karen Watling, Head of Finance via hybrid. I will now invite the Cabinet Member for Finance, Assets and Investment to introduce the report. Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to introduce report BCA 2402 to Cabinet, our social value policy. The purpose of this is to deliver social value through our contracts with our supply chain and also the way that we operate. Producing the policy is priority B45 in our action plan. The Public Services Social Value Act of 2012 requires us to consider how we can secure additional wider social, economic and environmental benefits when we commission public services. The proposed policy commits us to go beyond the requirement of the Act to enable us to deliver additional benefits to our communities in all our contracts. The policy also outlines a clear commitment from the Council to the delivery of social value, not only in our contracts, but also to consider how additional wider social value benefits can be achieved by the Council's own operation. Developing a social value culture is a significant change, which will require commitment to a social value journey delivering constant step changes. This journey will be planned in a corporate social value action plan. A key element of the policy, and this is explicitly stated in priority B45, will be to encourage all our contractors to take on apprentices and partner with local FE colleges on their training. Section 7 of the report outlines the legal framework for this. In addition to the Public Services Social Value Act 2012, we also need to consider Cabinet Office guidance in procurement policy notices, the National Procurement Policy Statement and the Procurement Act of 2023. We will have a social value training programme to support an understanding of how social value can be used as a tool to realise genuine benefits for our communities. The training programme will offer training options to contractors and potential bidders in addition to our staff. There will be quarterly progress updates for the senior leadership team and portfolio holders. Progress on the implementation of this policy will also be published on our website in an annual social value statement. This is recommended as good practice by both the LGA and the National Social Value Task Force. The first statement will be published at the end of this year. And finally, the policy will be reviewed on at least an annual basis to ensure that it is in line with any changes to legislation or the priorities of the two councils. So I'd like to propose a recommendation in section 3 that we approve the draft social value policy supported by an annual social value statement. Thank you.
Proposal, please. Oh yes, you've proposed it. I need a seconder. Councillor Derek Davis. Okay, questions from members. Councillor Sally Davies.
I'm interested in this policy because I would have thought we already produce social value in a lot of our activities. Is this not another level of red tape on top of what we do? I'm acting as a devil's advocate here because I can hear the questions maybe from the public on this, that this is another layer of red tape and that actually when we're getting people to bid for our contracts, our contractors have to jump through even more hoops than they have to now. Did we consult with the people who may bid for our contracts? And how are we going to make sure that this is not going to become just another layer of tick boxing and bureaucracy?
I will just say a few words, but I will hand over to either Katrina or Joe as the authors. But from my perspective, I don't think it is just a matter of tick boxing. It's to achieve a real benefit from implementing this policy. But you've got to remember that there is a legislative framework that it's working within. So some of it is determined by and defined by that framework. Is there something else that perhaps, Katrina, you could add to that?
Sorry. The approach that we've taken in writing the policy and the detail within our action plan is to try and keep things as simple as possible. So we're very mindful of making it easy for suppliers to respond, both SMEs and VCFSEs as well as those larger suppliers. We have been asking for social value within our tenders, but within the policy and the approach that we're planning to roll out, we will make that far more robust, so more comprehensive, better guidance for suppliers, training for suppliers as well, and also tools, so it's actually far clearer for suppliers and it's easier for them to respond. With the Public Services Social Value Act being implemented in 2013, it's now common practice for public sector to ask for social value in their tenders. The policy is leading us in a journey to make it as clear as possible and to make it very easy for our local supply chain to respond. And that certainly is my intent with the implementation of the policy.
But we're saying we're going to go further than the legislative framework. So how are we making sure that, and have we talked to our suppliers, that they're not going to be, it's becomes so burdensome to them that it's just too much for them?
The policy does go a little bit further because the Public Services Social Value Act asks only to consider social value in service contracts and service contracts above threshold. What we've done in our Act is be very open and say we will consider in all of our contracts. So we're making it consistent and giving a very clear message out to suppliers. In terms of consulting with our suppliers, we haven't consulted with them directly about this policy. However, we have been in conversations with our local chamber and also Suffolk Chamber of Commerce regarding approaches, and they're very supportive about our approach and want us to go out and talk to suppliers once we've got the policy established about the approach that we want to take and the journey we want to go on. Certainly with the VCFSE, again, we want to have conversations with them directly regarding the approach and how to roll it out. But certainly for us as Babergh District Council, our largest element of our supply chain is in building services. And a lot of those suppliers are very used to putting social value within their bids. What I'd like to do is just make that far more robust and clearer for them so we get a more mature response and a more meaningful social value offer that we can then work with them to make sure it actually is delivered within our communities. And I think it's that clarity that really could be improved upon.
Councillor Helen Davies.
Thank you. If you're putting in place a process that's a bit more complicated to do and you want a supplier to deliver more, isn't that going to put the price of the service up? You know, given we're all a bit constrained with money at the moment, how are we going to afford it? And is this likely to put suppliers off, you know, putting bids in?
We would very much hope it wouldn't put suppliers off putting bids in if we make it really clear what our ask of them is. And the approach that I've taken regarding social value is for us not to define what the offer should be, but to be very open. So it's open for suppliers to make their offer back to us about additionality that's in keeping with how they want to run their business and what they'd like to offer. The approach that we'd like to take is just to be really clear with them about what could be of value to us. So we're trying to ensure that they're not just layering on additional costs, you know, of what they think we might find of value, but genuinely offering additionality that would be a benefit to us. And there is a risk, and I did add it into the paper about potentially it might layer in costs, and that's why it's really important to have a clear policy and a clear approach and training for suppliers as well. So it is truly about additionality and not just adding costs into the process.
Are you kind of doing this at the moment already? And if so, can you give me an example of the kind of thing that you think adds social value?
We are asking for social value within our tenders. What I'd like to do is make our approach far more robust and it be clearer to suppliers. So we're separating out the three themes of social value and asking for weighting against each. So they're asking for a response against each of those elements. And examples of bids that come back in and potentially offers back from suppliers could be things like their approach to EDI, how well their sort of healthy workplace, how they're supporting their employees. It could be work that they're doing regarding reducing their carbon emissions and their negative impacts to the local environment. It could be how they're working with their own supply chain and recruiting staff locally. All of those things will add benefit to our local communities.
I have a question. I note in the page 6, the slides on here, so we can encourage bids from local suppliers, from SMEs and the voluntary sector. The majority of businesses in our district are micro enterprises. Could you just tell me how you will help them use their, help them bid for our contracts? Because obviously we do want to encourage smaller enterprises to bid for our contracts, but we also want to ensure value for money. So how do these two, on the surface, opposing criteria, social value versus value for money, work together?
To help micro businesses and smaller businesses to respond to bids, it's really about consistency and clarity. You know, so they see documentation that's common to them, that they've seen before, to reduce the time it takes them to reread and be familiar and confident to respond. And if we have got a consistent approach about the way we work, that will help that. In my experience working with micro businesses, they're very aware of the additionality that they're able to offer. They will straight away give you examples of directly how they're working with communities, because quite often it's the way that they sell their business locally within the community anyway. Hopefully with the approach we've got regarding social value, we're being clear regarding how they can add additionality. So some of the things that some of our micro businesses and VCFSE and smaller SMEs are doing already, they'll be able to identify as additionality to help them respond in their bids, because certainly in conversations with them they have good examples to give.
Thank you. Right. So, oh, I'm sorry, I missed you, Councillor Busby. I look forward to your question.
Well, it's directed at John Ward. You mentioned specifically that we were going to have a request about apprenticeships. Yet I look at the social value within our contracts and apprenticeships aren't mentioned. Is that a deliberate exclusion? Page 23 of the report.
Well, that's an interesting question, because I was taking from our priority, where we talked about apprenticeships in the priority. Can I just clarify, is this still the intent that we want to encourage our partners to take up or to offer apprenticeships and work with the FE colleges, because that was in the priority in our action plan?
We haven't specifically referred to that within the policy or our action plan, but absolutely regarding an economic offer back from our bidders, providing apprenticeships depending on the size of the contract and as appropriate would certainly be an excellent example of social value that they could offer to us.
Sorry, Derek, let's carry on. We've obviously been doing this since 2012 in some shape or form. This looks like it's taking it to a new level. Although I see that there's supposed to be no cost to the general fund because we're using existing resource, that existing resource could be used to do something else if we carried on the way we are. How much additional resource are we going to have to put in to deliver all of the things that we're talking about in here?
A large proportion of the additional resource would be myself in role as Head of Commission and Procurement regarding developing the approach and driving the action plan. Certainly in terms of the training, developing the training, delivering that. Again, that would be part of the resource from my post. In terms of the approach across the council and developing our approach regarding procurement and contract management, it sits alongside other work that's there. Whilst we have been asking for social value in our tenders to date, we haven't been doing it as robustly as we could, and therefore we really haven't taken advantage of the offers that are out there from bidders back as part of our contracts. So whilst we have been doing it, it's been very light, and this approach and the policy we've got here allows us to embed it far more robustly, so we really will benefit from those offers going forward.
Thank you.
It's more an answer than a question. This is a great paper, being really well put together, but it also sort of, if you like, goes over onto my portfolio in terms of business generation and the economy. And the team, the business team, actually actively encourage smaller businesses to take part in this process, which I believe has been made easier by this paper, and by offering social value, it means it's not just about the cheapest, but the best. And in terms of apprenticeships, that also falls within the economy team, who are actively going out there and encouraging businesses to start apprenticeships, and also using the innovation labs and the skill centre to ensure that we widen that as well. I think this is a great tool for our economy team to be able to use in terms of bringing that all together.
I'm too eager.
No problem at all, Chair. This is an open question to Councillor Ward or any of the officers. It's on page 27, social value of policy. The first time I've come across it before, perhaps not in my sphere of experience, but capital infrastructure projects using qualitative and quantitative Green Book methodology. The social value assessment between business cases, development for pilot schemes and investments for capital infrastructure projects using financial social value metrics as appropriate. If any of you could expand on Green Book methodology, how it helps develop a social value assessment, and how those pilot schemes are worked and measured within those social value metrics. Any sort of flesh to the bone you could give on that would be really welcome.
I'll pass that one over, I think.
All right.
There are a number of measurement tools for social value, but the most common one is called TOMS, which is Themes, Outcomes and Measures, and it was developed by the National Social Value Task Force. The methodology behind those TOMS measures are the Green Book. So they've taken those and developed TOMS as a result of that. The reports that we're currently using in that team use TOMS measures, which is why there's the link back to the Green Book there in the description.
Okay, thank you.
Members? Right, I will now ask for any questions from other members. Present.
My question's already been asked. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Wymark.
Thank you, Chair. It's quite a complex process, and value is created in many different ways, through finance, through social value, etc. The points made by Councillors Davis and also by Councillor Busby, embedding that culture into our contractors will be quite a long-winded process. They need to really understand what's expected of them, and my concern would be, can we actually do that in a relatively short space of time, and potentially would we lose our ability to contract with some of our existing people? Will they say, well, we don't really understand this, and are we going to restrict our supply by removing certain values, by taking contracts out? And I think also there's a public perception issue which we need to look at quite closely.
Thank you, Councillor Wyman. We're not doing this in isolation. You've got to remember that other local authorities are doing this, and so increasingly contractors are expecting it, so that it's not something that they have to do just for Babergh and Mid-Suffolk. It is becoming generally embedded in the way they operate anyway, because it's expected with all of the contracts that they enter into these days. So is there anything more I can say apart from that?
Just to add that obviously the Public Services Social Value Act came to force in 2013. And when it first came out, local government very much embraced that act and embedded it. And it's been latter years that central government now are using social value more fully. and they have specific guidance for central government to make sure it's fully embedded. So what we're finding now is certainly the health sector locally, our health colleagues are now using social value more robustly. So certainly now, you know, it's unusual to see a public services tender with social value not included.
Just a quick follow-up point. If we're looking at the change now, then presumably it would be quite a good idea to value that metric and make sure we can understand where we are today and where we'll be, say, in 12 months' time and or 24 months' time, because I can sort of readily imagine that would be a topic that ONS would probably need to scrutinise perhaps in a year or 18 months' time.
Yeah, without a doubt. And we've got the annual performance statement. There'll be constant monitoring throughout the year, and there'll be the regular updates to portfolio holders. But yes, I'm sure that overview and scrutiny will want to look at this at some point, and we'd welcome that.
Thank you, Chair.
So, I will now open the item up for debate. Have we any further questions? Councillor Busby.
Debate. Well, unusual for a Lib Dem. I find myself sitting on the fence here. On the one side, I think it's a sledgehammer to crack a walnut, and I think it's put forward by people that don't understand the financial problems that councils are now facing. But on the other side, having sat through 3 hours of debate this afternoon on cultural change and the necessity of it, this is probably one of the best ways that we can do it, by emphasising it. We won't achieve it by not doing the hard yard. So, yeah, I have mixed feelings on this one, but I think hopefully if we do it correctly, not too heavy-handed, with the minimum of fuss and the minimum of effort we can get away with, then if I had a vote, I'd support it.
Councillor Davis.
Yeah, I'm not quite the same as Councillor Busby, but I'm very similar to Councillor Sally Davies earlier on, questioning about this. But having read it through, and it's a really thorough, good piece of work, I'm convinced, that's why I second it, of the value of it. And while I understand your concerns, I think it actually makes it easier for businesses, because I think it gives them a clearer direction once they actually get into it. The challenge for us, and for the cultural change, is to make sure we get that message across to them as early as possible and to as wide-ranging section of the business in Babergh that we can, which is why I mentioned the business team and the communities team as well, who play a role in this, in pointing, in directing businesses to procurement and commissioning. So there's a wider choice for us, harder work for the officers, I appreciate, but it gives us better value, and the social value is intrinsic in that. And people that are coming to us who want to supply Babergh know what they need to supply. The social value, the cost value obviously as well, and that cultural change, you know, step by step gets it better. And you're right, it won't be overnight, it'll take a little bit of time, but we have to start somewhere. And so I commend the officer's report, and like I say, it's certainly got rid of all my initial concerns.
Sally Davies.
Yeah, I rather like Councillor Busby. I have mixed feelings, and I suspect the devil is going to be in the detail, and the devil is going to be in trying it, seeing how it works, and then evaluating it and scrutinising it. However, when you look at the 3 social values, economic, environmental, social, they feed right into the priorities of this administration. And certainly our suppliers in environmental terms, that's how we're going to meet net zero. That's a key fundamental part of it. The same with our resilient communities, the social value, and our upskilling, making ourselves thrive economically and getting better skills for our people. So actually, this feeds right into our priorities, and if we can make it work without getting bogged down, and we can still encourage the smaller companies to bid for contracts, then I'm in favour of it.
questions or any other contributions from councillors? Councillor Helen Davies.
Davis. Yeah, when I first read this, I thought, okay, this sounds quite good. And then I thought, okay, as per Councillor Sally Davis, the devil is in the detail. And I think it will be quite hard implementing it at the beginning. So, you know, I would hope that the officers will be very geared up to answering questions of contractors or potential bidders. If it's too onerous, I just think we're not going to get the right contractors coming forward. And I'd still slightly wary, because 4.2 says the proposed policy goes beyond the requirement of the Act. And I think maybe we have a tendency to gold plate things. And I would be more inclined to go with the Basic Act and then see how that pans out over time, and then maybe add, you know, iterations of further things in there that we think are good. Could we review this in, say, a year's time, so we can see the impact of this implementation, you know, on our ability to get bids in to provide the services that we want to provide? I would ask for that.
Right, Councillor Derek Davis and then Councillor Ward.
Okay, yeah, sorry, I know this is my second go, but I will just say both to Councillor Wyman and to Councillor Helen Davies, Councillor McCraw's not here today, but I'm sure he would have pointed out, and we've got ONS that will look at it as well, but in the performance reports and in the state of Babergh in the end, this will be thoroughly scrutinised, and those performance figures will come forward. So I have no qualms about that. He'll be all over it.
Followed by Councillor Potter.
Yes, just to reiterate what Councillor Derek Davis has said, the progress and performance monitoring is that has been, or it will be built into this, is quite clear, and I think will ensure that we do have a proper understanding of the benefits that it's delivering. As to going beyond the requirement of the Act, I see no reason for us not to consider all of our contracts, whether they're service contracts, goods, or any other works. It's a consistent approach to across the board for all of our contracts, and also to ensure that we embed it within our own operations ourselves. So I don't have any problems with that. It's consistency and comprehensiveness are the key factors there.
Yeah, just to add also to Councillor Derek Davis, consultation is planned also, 9.3 on the consultations with the extended leadership team I picked up there. They will contribute to the corporate priorities, the council's plans, and the consultation to provide and develop the social value priorities and offer ideas to our suppliers. So there's, as it's already said, and I don't want the risk of duplication too much, but to only add that there's a severe undertaking with this of any plan to create and develop an assessment which the procedures are far beyond what I would have come across in my time. But the work, therefore, is going to be strong, valuable, and I think that we need to support it and develop it and see what the results are and get across consensus approach. Thank you.
Well, I see that in the paper we say that the policy will be reviewed on at least an annual basis to ensure that the policy is in line with any changes to legislation or any changes in our priorities. So I think this is one of the measures that we should report on, and if we want to position ourselves as a community enabling council, the creation of social value is one of the metrics that we should use. Has everybody made their contribution? Yes? Yes? Okay. So, Recommendation 3.1 to approve the draft social value policy supported by an annual social value statement. I will now ask the Governance Officer to conduct the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now in progress. Thank you, Chair. That is 6 votes for. That's carried.
Thank you. Okay, we now move to item 9, BCA/24/03, proposed development of the funding and grants processes. I will now introduce the report as Cabinet Member for People and Place. You're hearing quite a lot from me today, aren't you? Okay. We know that VCFSE groups across the country, not to mention our district, are facing great challenges, much like ourselves. Increasing demand, recruiting and retention of volunteers, and financial sustainability. But as a council, we rely on these groups to be our partners, to help us deliver and develop services. Our funding and the advice and support is critical to these groups, but what this review has demonstrated is that as a council, we have not always applied them in a strategic way to support our priorities, which are focused on helping all our communities. This review has given us the opportunity to have a rethink and a reset. It wasn't about cutting back, it was about better targeting and strengthening the links between the voluntary and community sector and the council, not to mention maximising the impact of our funding to secure monies from central government and other bodies. Last year, we invested just over 1.3 million in grants, including SIL, Section 106, business rate relief, and discretionary awards. Grants are currently administered by several of our directorates with different criteria and different accountability. The communities team has done a full, comprehensive analysis, working with grants leads across the council, and it is contained in Appendix 1 of the paper. They have looked at from SIL to locality grants, business rate relief to rent relief. What we are proposing is a new approach. We are a community enabling council, and we see this new approach creating a step change in our relationship with the voluntary groups and via them with our communities. I would like to commend the team led by Di Robinson, who have produced this comprehensive analysis of the council's grants, spoken to a range of internal and external stakeholders, and developed this plan in a very timely fashion. The paper contains a new community grant action plan with 5 themes delivered by 34 actions. This will be delivered through an internal staff funders network, working to a common calendar of funding rounds. Councillor Ward has detailed our proposed social value policy, and our grants have a measurable social value impact. In fact, we asked the recipients of our grants to tell us the contribution they have made to social impact. One area we as a council need to get better at is making it easier for groups to apply for our grants, and more importantly, we need to celebrate this partnership and its successes. As I said earlier, communities are at the heart of our approach as a council. To deliver this, we must reflect that within our operations. For example, communities and economic development should be working more with planning to secure Section 106 and community benefit funds. When the SIL expenditure review takes place this autumn, that should include the thriving economies and thriving communities portfolio holders as part of the Councillor Working Group. And we are also aiming to produce a simplified guide to support the voluntary sector in better accessing SIL. We should also work with communities and parishes to support their approach to determining their priorities for neighbourhood SIL. We will better focus neighbourhood SIL using neighbourhood plans and PIPs to target these Section 106 contributions. We are simplifying our grant system by combining the capital and revenue streams, which result in a fund of over £250,000. For the remainder of 2024-25, we will review the match funding provision for the Economic Development Shared Prosperity Fund to further support voluntary groups to apply successfully for this funding. Fortunately, it's not me. We also have strategic partners who are vital to our communities, where we should secure their future with a 3-year funding package starting in 25-26. We want to create some new funds, a biodiversity fund and a community and social action fund, which locality officers can use for small grants. For example, helping a group hire a room for their meetings. These are very small amounts of money which voluntary groups find quite difficult to raise themselves. We also want to help groups fund the feasibility studies they require to pursue their projects. For example, infrastructure projects that they might have in their locality. So what does this mean in financial terms? I know you've all read the paper, but I shall draw your attention to the financial table. Line 1 of the finance table, community economy, 0.5 of FTE. There is no funding in this for this year. The team will work towards repurposing an existing community's role, which could develop into this wider role. If this is successful, there will be no need for an increase in 25-26 and beyond. The delegated authority in the paper allows for the Director of Thriving Economy and Communities, together with the portfolio holder, to amend this as required. Line 3, Community Caretaking Scheme. This is an increase of 15,327 per annum to enhance the offer to communities to undertake more local delivery of public realm activity. This is something that we have said we want to encourage as a council. Line 4, the Biodiversity Fund. This is a small grants fund available to local groups to develop local work to increase biodiversity. Again, this is one of our priorities. And I draw your attention to the SPD that we have recently consulted on for biodiversity. It's a minimal amount to invest in more activity in communities. And line 5, the new Community and Social Action Fund. I have mentioned this already. This will encourage more activity for emerging community groups to do things for themselves in their neighbourhoods and for their communities. It's designed as a minimal enabling fund. Of course, we will be assessing this, and if we can repurpose internally, we will of course do so. But if we want to put our communities at the heart of what we do, this new action plan is an effective catalyst for transformation. I will propose this report, and I ask for a seconder. Councillor Potter, thank you. So we will now go to questions from members. I will attempt to answer these questions, but I can see I have a full panoply of talents from the communities team. So what I can't, they will. Councillors. Councillor Sally Davies.
As you may expect, I've got a question on SIL, Community Infrastructure Levy. I'm detecting that we think there's some sort of problem with the way SIL expenditure happens now, that we need to link up with communities and economies. Could anybody explain what they think the shortcomings are at the moment with the way we deal with SIL? That's my first question. My second question is, in the SIL paragraph, it says they would review the spend of neighbourhood SIL and offer support to parish councils. Are we suggesting that parish councils don't know what their own priorities are, and that we're going to go in there and tell them what they are?
Right, I will attempt to answer these two questions, and I will also call on the advice of the team. I think as far as the SIL process is concerned, as we know, it's exceptionally complex. And one of the things that we are trying to achieve with this policy, I would contend, is to start to break down some of the silos that exist between directorates. I think SIL is complex. I think it is has been the bailiwick of certain groups within the council. I think we need to widen that out. As far as parishes are concerned, I don't think that we want to leave the impression that parishes do not know what they want to spend neighbourhood SIL on. I think sometimes they need assistance on how to navigate it and how to get the best out of it. Is there anything that the team would like to add to that? Laura.
Yes, please.
Please.
I'd just like to add, again, that I don't think there's specifically anything wrong. I think the relationship that communities have with the BCFSE is slightly different to the SIL team, and because maybe have a different understanding of the needs of the sector, which I think we want to feed into that review. So understanding that community centres are really struggling to access funding, or that voluntary early years providers. So it gives us an opportunity to share those current needs with the SIL team, so that they consider that within their review. Oh, and I think just the question around reviewing the neighbourhood SIL, I think we're aware that there's significant funding sitting with parish councils, which we can see from the external-facing website, and it's really looking at collectively how we can work with the SIL team to help parish councils maybe carry out further consultation with communities using the PIPs, neighbourhood plans, and the tools that are available to help them carry out that consultation and then allocate the funding.
Thank you, Laura. Further questions? Councillor Busby. Oh. Something we all look forward to. Okay, if there are no further questions from members, are there any questions from any other members? No.
Not necessarily would need an answer now, but I was interested in the payments to the two citizens advice groups that we support, and I wonder if somebody could let me have those up-to-date figures of what we actually pay annually to Sudbury and to Ipswich. Thank you.
Yeah, we're very happy to provide that for you.
Thank you. If there are not any other questions, I will now open the item for debate. Councillor Busby, would you like to contribute?
As a Lib Dem, I'm not finding it unusual sitting on this fence, and it's here again. On the one hand, it's more money, and I'm not certain whether the message has got across yet that we are in financial trouble, and we need to be perhaps cutting things, not increasing. It seems to be this is going to be a trend that we're going to be facing throughout our term, and at some point we're going to have to make a decision that things are going to have to cost less, not more. On the other side of the fence, of course, it's crucial, especially if we're to deliver our community preferences first. So, again, I think in this case, it's to be justified that we spend the extra, but we are going to have to face the truth at some point in the near future.
Thank you. Councillor Derek Davis.
Yeah, thank you. I'm having a really great night tonight because I love this paper. It's just brilliant, probably because I've got that communities team background portfolio holder. And I was fortunate enough to be the portfolio holder when we introduced in Babergh the locality awards. Now, and I appreciate, we're not flush with cash, in £64,000, still a lot of money, whatever you call it. But the value in that, you just have to look at the breakdown of where it's used. Those community groups, I mean, £250 to us, as a council is a trifling amount, and we have to admin it. But it means so much to these community groups, whether that's the pop-up library, whether it's the drama group, the bowls club, whatever. It's so important and it means such a lot to them. My only disappointment is that we've still got an unspent allocation, so I would urge all ward councillors, use your money. I know sometimes things happen and it doesn't happen, it doesn't work out, but yeah, use it. And the other thing that I would also point out, and again, I could go through the whole list, but I'll just stick with these two. Holiday activity funding. Wow, what a great initiative. What a great use of money that we have. Holbrook are holding in August this year, so if you've got families, I recommend going to the one in Holbrook. We've got Hadley. But I know from experience, and the officers will have visited all of these, how much it means to the community, especially to those young children. And I have a mantra, and I use it at the Ganges ward all the time: no child should go hungry or be lonely during the school holidays. And that's the summer, the winter, whenever. And it's just, and I appreciate money is tight, but it's invaluable, absolutely invaluable. So yeah, a great piece of work. Well done, everybody involved. That's it.
Councillor Ward, followed by Councillor Potter.
Yeah, I'd like to reiterate what Councillor Davis has said. This is a piece of work that we've known that we've needed to do for quite some time, and it's excellent. It's a very comprehensive review, and it will help greatly in terms of improving the accessibility to our grants and the greater understanding of our grant system. Just to pick up Councillor Busby's point about the finances, yeah, we are under a lot of pressure, but the benefit that will be gained from what we're doing here, I think, will more than outweigh the cost. And we're looking at just over £20,000 for the current financial year, which will come from our Strategic Priorities Reserve, and that's rising to £56,000 in each of the next 2 financial years. And we've got time, and we're looking at doing a thorough review of our finances going forward. We've got time to build this in and to make sure that we can accommodate it. So while obviously I would be very reluctant to agree to lots of additional costs and spend over the next few years, but we've got to look at the benefits that will accrue as well. So we'll get there on the finances, won't we, Melissa?
Councillor Potter.
Yeah, I can only follow what both Councillor Derek Davis and Councillor John Ward have said. I think that I'm very enthusiastic about the capital expenditure, although obviously we live in difficult financial tides, which we will have to continue to navigate no matter what. That is on us to look forward to try to get the best effect we can in our community social funds. And our poster that we're creating here on, I think it's 6.2 or 6.3, there's a table that you can see the posts directly that will address what's needed of our community, our economy, from housing to public realm, caretaking, Also new funds in biodiversity, community and social action fund. Of course, those costs are going to be evidenced, are going to be seen, but nevertheless, I think what we can take from those reserves will get so much back and so much value. And by the way, I have spent all my locality funding too this year, well on the way next year. So yeah, happy to say that.
Thank you. Well, I do think that what we're actually looking at here is better targeting of our resources and creating more impact, and also making our funding and grant system less complicated for voluntary groups to apply. And as I said, we need the voluntary sector to help us deliver our priorities, and they need to be funded. Obviously, I think we are all very conscious of our financial position, but one of the things that we've always said is that if we can get communities to help us deliver our services and better target our services, then we should certainly do so. If there are any further contributions, Councillor Sally Davies.
Yeah, I mean, I welcome the rationalisation of the grant funding and anything that makes it simpler, because it always seems just so complicated when you look at the grant funding. I also welcome the inclusion of planning and the SIL and Section 106 funding, because planning's tentacles go out into so many other of our activities, and I don't think that's fully recognised. So I'm really glad to see that there is going to be a role for planning at the heart of all the rest of the grant funding. So I'm glad to see that.
Totally agree. The more planning is involved in our communities, the better decisions we will all make. So if there are no further contributions, recommendations to adopt the plan to achieve the overall objective of creating thriving and resilient communities. The plan details the steps required to achieve this new approach for supporting the VCFSE sector, assigning responsibilities and deadlines for each action, ensures that everyone involved is aware of their role and the overall timeline. 3.2, that the Director for Sustainable Communities and Economy, with the agreement of the Cabinet Member for Thriving Communities, have delegated authority to make amendments to the plan as necessary. 3.3, to report the progress of the plan to Cabinet in 12 months' time. I will now ask the Governance Officer to conduct the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now in progress. Thank you, Chair. That is 6 votes for. That's carried.
Thank you. Now moving on to item 10, BCA/24/04, response to National Grid Statutory Consultation on the Norwich to Tilbury overhead line project. I will now invite the Cabinet Member for Heritage Planning and Infrastructure to introduce the report. Councillor Sally Davies.
Thank you, Chair. I'm asking Cabinet to accept paragraphs 3.1 and 3.2 of the recommendations in the report prepared for the Norwich to Tilbury consultation. The report is a technical paper. The actual response to the consultation from Babergh in mid-Suffolk is in the appendix. The Norwich to Tilbury National Grid project is a very large infrastructure project consisting of a line of pylons and related equipment stretching across our region, with some areas going underground. The project will connect energy coming from offshore wind farms to the transmission network, sending energy to the wider national grid. And we do need infrastructure to feed our growing need for electricity as we transition from fossil fuels to clean, renewable energy. Our councils do not dispute this. What we do dispute is that miles of pylons across our countryside is the right way to provide this infrastructure. We want National Grid to properly explore the alternatives that are rapidly emerging instead of ploughing on with the pylons. The arm of the National Grid that is an electricity system operator undertook a study of options for energy transmission in our area. There are offshore options and options using high voltage direct current underground lines. These options, if viable, would be substantially less disruptive to our region. We must put pressure on National Grid to look at these options. Our response does engage with the current plans, but look at the actual harm that will be done by this project. There's a vast list in the report of harm to communities, biodiversity, heritage, public health, economies, tourism, and our landscape. The report contains granular detail about this impact, and I want to pay tribute to Bron Curtis and her team, who've produced a remarkably detailed and comprehensive document to support our response and to assist National Grid in its consultation. I'm very proud to present such outstanding work to the Cabinet. I echo my colleague Andrew Stringer at Mid Suffolk, who is clear that we are not NIMBYs. We know we must have the means to transport energy, and East Anglia, we're vital to this endeavour. But we care about the landscape and the environment and our communities, and it's our job to take these concerns back to government. Our position is this: we want National Grid to properly explore the alternatives before embarking on this destructive project. Thanks. So I would ask Cabinet to agree the recommendations at paragraph 3.1 and 3.2.
Thank you, Councillor Davies. Questions from members? Oh God, I'm sorry. I do apologise. I need a proposer and a seconder. Councillor Helen Davies. Councillor Sally Davies is the proposer. Councillor Helen Davies is the seconder. I'll get it. It's only my second time. I'll get it right. Okay. Now, questions from members. Councillor Ward.
Yes, I've got two sort of questions. I think there's some the changes or additions I'd like to see to the report before it goes off. The first is under biodiversity, and it's on page 76 of the report, and it's the third bullet point referring to otters as a priority species. I totally agree with that, what we've stated in that bullet, but I'd like to reinforce it actually, because one of my parishes, Stratford St Mary, has also responded, and their response is concerning the National Grid's ecology assessment of the Stour Valley, and the fact that there does seem to be a lack of awareness of the environment of the Devon Vale National Landscape there, because the ecology report provided by National Grid apparently has stated that the conclusion is that this is an unsuitable habitat for otters, which will come as a lot of good, well, not so good, but it will come as interesting news to the otter families that are living there. There is a thriving population, and there has been for some years. So I think I'd like to see this beefed up a bit with a recognition that we share Stratford St Mary's Parish Council's concern about the lack of understanding of the local fauna in the Stour Valley. That's one. The other one is a bit further down under heritage on page 77, and it's about halfway down that page. And also on page 78, the fourth bullet there about the alternative, the Waveney Valley alternative. And I did speak to colleagues at Mid Suffolk earlier today, and I don't think they picked up on this, because we've stated in that fourth bullet on page 78 that the alternative proposals for Waveney Valley are to be welcomed. I'm not sure, to be honest, that the Mid-Suffolk do actually welcome that, and I think we probably need to get some clarification before we actually state that. But more particularly, back on page 77, we've said that it is concluded that there will be no additional significant effects if the Waveney Valley alternative is used. And we say that it includes the reinstatement of historic field boundaries which reduce the effect from significant to neutral. Well, actually, the effect would not be neutral because although there will be reinstatement, they will be left with two large cable ceiling end compounds. So that is not a neutral effect. So again, I think we probably need to rephrase that in the context of what that Waveney Valley alternative would require.
Thank you, Councillor Ward. Any further questions? No. Questions from other members? No? Okay. So I now open up the item for debate. Councillor Busby.
Well, referring to the Stratford St Mary issue, I think we'd all like to see it a bit hotter, wouldn't we?
If I could just respond, Bron is on the. Bron's not. I don't think Bron's here, but she's just told me that the comments are advice from our technical advisors on those points you've just made, John. I'm wondering how to go about what we should do about sorting that out.
Councillor Ward.
Can Bron speak to Councillor Stringer, please?
About the Waveney?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
all right, yeah.
Yeah, about Waveney. So is there nothing else we can say about the otters, given the fact that they clearly do live in Stratford St Mary in the River Stour there?
Yeah, because it seems the technical advisors are not aware of that, so... Okay, I will sort that out with Bron.
And there is photographic and video evidence of them.
Oh, really? Photos of otters?
Bron is online.
Oh, is she?
If we require her assistance or clarification of any matters.
Oh, yeah, I wasn't sure. Great. Shall we talk to her?
Councillor Davies, would you like to? Is she there?
Hello.
She speaks.
Hi, Bron. It's Councillor Sally Davis here. Hi, Bron. What can we say about the otters? Because there's obviously empirical evidence that there are otters there.
That's fine. So we have responded to the assessment information that Grid have provided, and we've stated that that's inaccurate and insufficient. What we could do to reflect Councillor Ward's concern is to refer to the comments that the communities have made and to flag that there is information coming from the communities which adds more context that should be explored appropriately.
Are you happy with that, Councillor Ward?
I am.
Yes, yeah. And in terms of the Waveney Valley, is it possible to have a conversation with Councillor Stringer?
Yes, I can do that.
Thank you.
Now open the item for debate. I know this is a subject which is very contentious, and many people, many residents within our district have very passionate views about it. Councillor Ward?
Yeah, it is a very, very complicated subject, this, and that there are lots of things to consider. I think what the real thrust of our response is that we do need to... Norwich to Tilbury is one project in the Great Grid Upgrade programme, and we do need to address the cumulative impact of all of the projects. So there's going to be a vast number of current and also proposed energy projects in our region. Norwich to Tilbury is going to be a core part of that, and we do need a coordinated strategic approach to look at all of the impacts on our communities and the environment. And without that, I don't see that any of the impact assessments for Norwich to Tilbury are reliable. Not just the impacts on the communities, but also those affecting National Grid themselves. Their project delivery timing and location of where they're going to carry out development. Because we've got problems such as our constrained highway network, and also they're going to be competing with other projects for resources and specialist workforce, and therefore is that 2030 deadline that they're working to really realistic? And if it isn't, and people are questioning it, then that does give a scope for looking at other technologies and infrastructure design solutions, and they will emerge not just as viable technological alternatives, but as cost-effective alternatives. The DCO timetable that they've got is extremely tight, looking at DCO submission next summer, and probably an 18-month to 24-month DCO timetable before they start construction. So 2030 is looking very, very challenging. And we've got the HIONS review of the network reinforcement within East Anglia, and that was published last September, and it's quite clear, and it does state that the need for Norwich to Tilbury can be deferred by 5 years to 2035, and that, again, that brings into play alternatives. So the current time and cost pressures are being afforded undue weight by National Grid, and affecting the design of the solution. So, which is why we think, and why we've stated that a pause is necessary, allow those alternatives to be looked at. I think from the point of view of the alternatives in terms of onshore versus offshore, the ESO study did look at a number of alternative solutions, onshore versus offshore solutions, but they were in the context of, very much in the context of the Offshore Coordination Support Scheme, which looked at coordinating sealing with North Falls and 5 estuaries, and possibly also the Tarshan interconnector. But we do need to understand that there's a massive amount of these wind farms connecting at different points along the network, from Necton, Norwich Main, through to substations at the new one at Leiston, and then the new proposed one at Friston, and the East Anglia connection node. It's all bringing power into the region at different points. It's not saying that this is to service London only is a simplistic assessment of it. And we need to look at the way the network's designed and to have alternative routes. So I think a purely offshore solution is unfeasible from purely a network design perspective, but also, of course, the marine conservation area and other protected areas offshore. So the focus probably needs to be more on an alternative onshore solution, which is where the high voltage DC underground comes in as a much more viable one. And because certainly the Germans, that's now the default in Germany for long distance network reinforcement. There's a lot of focus on pylons and the visual impact and other adverse impacts of pylons. For me, from where I live and for my communities, it's not so much the pylons of the problem, it is the undergrounding through the national landscape and the impact there. We're talking about a 120 metre wide swathe cut through the Dedham Vale national landscape. It's going to be horrendous through the construction phase, and even after reinstatement, it's still not going to look the same. The HVDC underground is a far less intrusive technology. We're looking at a swathe that will be probably 1/3, if that, of we're looking at around about 30-40 metres wide scale, because the nature of AC is you've got to separate the cables by quite a long way to put them underground because of the impact of how they interfere with one another. You don't get that with the DC option. And of course, the whole transmission of DC is far more efficient. There's far less loss of energy. So it has huge benefits. And I know the drawbacks are that, well, do we have all the cables? There's sufficient cable to meet the demand, which is increasing across the whole of the continent. Well, who knows? But that's another issue. So in conclusion, I do like the report. I think it addresses everything. It is a highly technical report, but it does stress our desire to see a pause while alternatives are investigated, which is the way forward, I think.
Thank you, Councillor Ward. Obviously, this is in response to the consultation. I do feel that this is an issue which requires us as a council to use other forms of communication to put our point of view across. Obviously, we are given the whole issue about renewable energy. We are very much in favour of that, but we also want to preserve our landscape, our biodiversity, and we want the best solution for our residents, which might not be the solution that National Grid want. We recognise that the new government is very keen on these infrastructure projects. We are very keen on them. We are not NIMBYs in any shape or form, but we will protect our districts and the livelihoods of our residents. So, if there are any other... Oh, Councillor Ward.
Sorry, yes, you just reminded me of something there, Chair. And that is, I do understand the government's desire to push ahead with these schemes because there is a certain amount of urgency, and we've seen that they've made a decision already on Seneca. I would hope that they... Obviously, this has to go through a DCO process, which is fine, but I would stress that if I could give advice to the Energy Secretary and the Chancellor of the Exchequer, be curious about what you're being told by National Grid. Don't take it at face value. Look at some of the detail and get them to explain why they feel they have to do this and why they think alternatives are not viable. Because the alternatives are viable. It's just get them to be curious.
Okay, so if there are no further contributions, recommendations to respond to the consultation, the Director for Planning and Builder Control in collaboration with Cabinet members for Heritage, Planning and Infrastructure consider any proposed amendments to the suggested response and be authorised to make amendments before submitting a response to the government. I will now ask the Governance Officer to conduct the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now in progress. Thank you, Chair. That is 6 votes for. That's carried.
Thank you. So that concludes the business of Cabinet for tonight. The date and time of the next meeting, it's scheduled for Friday, the 2nd of August at 2:30 p.m. Thank you.